morning. Let's do a sound check and see if that's working. I'm gonna just make sure that the sound guys say everything's cool and we're good. And we'll go. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Welcome to another day of COP28. So excited to have this opportunity to share a little bit from the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance and our esteemed colleagues in the panel today about how we're thinking about going beyond the megawatt. You know, corporate energy buyers have made an enormous difference in how we look at the market and the kind of change that we can make when we think about the corporate action for buying clean energy as a key driver in making a change to decarbonize the grid everywhere. We've had an amazing impact already. You know, so far CEBA members have contracted for over 70 gigawatts of clean energy contracts. In fact, in 2022, our members contracted for over 17 gigawatts of clean energy, which drove, by our estimate, some 70% of all the clean energy assets that were built in the US in 2022. That's an amazing impact. We're actually making things happen and changing underlying markets to use the power of business. Forgive me, Marvel Comics, but to use our power for good. Our panel today is set to give you a little more insight into how that's thinking, because beyond just thinking about the clean energy revolution, we really have to think about the full consequences of our actions. Not just asking our supply chains and our partners across the world to create, build, and deliver clean energy solutions, but to think about how that affects the rest of the ecosystem. Not just the clean energy, but also the environmental responsibility and the social justice impacts of the whole ecosystem supplying this new revolution in clean energy solutions. We've got a bunch of folks who've had some great insights into that, some great insights into how we're using the business to make that difference. And for openers, the Department of Energy. So for openers, really appreciate the opportunity to introduce to you the Chief Principal Assistant Secretary of the Department of Energy, Kristen Christalis. So thank you very much for being here. Sorry.
So $630 billion. That is the annual purchasing power of the US government. We are by far the largest direct purchaser, and we are also the major infrastructure funder for most of the projects in the world. 2 years ago, the Biden-Harris administration launched the Federal Buy Clean Initiative, and the intention there was for us to use and leverage this purchasing power to transform our portfolio of 300,000 buildings and our fleet of 600,000 cars and trucks in order to achieve three primary goals. So the first is that we want to be moving towards zero-emission fleets. We also want to make sure that our building portfolio is energy efficient, that it is fully electric, and that it is powered by 100% zero-carbon electricity. The second is that we need to really build and boost the resilience of our infrastructure, our operations, and especially our supply chains. And the third is that we want to foster a culture of sustainability within our federal workforce. We want to make sure that we're advancing equity and environmental justice, and that we're leveraging partnerships like with folks on the stage here to really accelerate progress and use the leverage that we have. At the Department of Energy, we're using this in several ways. So one of the programs I wanted to highlight is called the Net Zero Labs Initiative. And this is increasing the energy efficiency as well as the clean power that is fueling our 17 national labs, which are DOE's crown jewels. So DOE's labs are leading by example to address some of the most energy intensive and hardest to decarbonize government facilities. We're doing that not just to reduce our carbon footprint, but as a way of actually saving taxpayer dollars that would otherwise go to energy use. We're doing that to help build our clean energy workforce. And the national labs are really our most complex energy users. They've got demand and resilience requirements that will typically exceed what you would see in a standard facility. So each of our labs houses heavy business facilities. They've got energy-intensive data centers, which I think our Amazon colleagues may recognize. And we've just got a lot of need for just continuous power that is secure, that is reliable. And so through this pilot initiative, what we are doing is demonstrating that clean energy can actually reliably power some of these critical components. We also have another program that is called the Federal Energy Management Program, and it's promoting energy efficiency and sustainability, working with stakeholders across our federal agencies to help them meet some of their energy-related goals, to identify some of these affordable solutions that they could deploy, facilitating public-private partnerships, and then providing energy leadership to the country. So making sure that, again, we as a federal government are leading by example. So the FEMP has recently announced $28 million in funding to assist federal facilities with energy conservation technologies through a grant program called EFFECT. And the program is going to create $23 million in energy cost savings, avoid 82,000 metric tons of greenhouse gases, and importantly, it's going to leverage $837 million in private financing. So especially for folks who feel like these aren't good investments, we're very strategically using these public dollars to actually leverage private sector financing into some of these programs. So I know a lot of the work that we talk about with procurement is focused on how we get more clean energy and energy efficiency, but a big part of the administration's priorities is really a focus on our communities, right? Making sure that people are at the center of the energy transition, that they are the ones who are the primary beneficiaries of all of these investments. And so our clean energy procurement, we know, can transform the energy market. And when you pair it with a community-centered approach that is really prioritizing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, then we are going to transform local economies, boost the quality of life for people everywhere, but especially for our most vulnerable communities. And so at DOE, we've embarked on a range of efforts that are focused on identifying the barriers for these underserved communities to access DOE programs. So we've got all of this funding coming in through bill and from IRA. We need to make sure that the communities who need those funds and want to access them have the ability and the capacity to be able to do that. So we're investing a lot in helping our communities to be able to access those programs. We want them to access the benefits, the services, the procurement opportunities that are afforded by these programs, which is going to really continue to advance our whole of government approach that we've adopted as a government. The final thing that I would make is that I'm sure folks are aware that we've been really investing a lot through bill and IRA, billions of dollars across the federal government to make big investments on clean energy, right? Make sure that we've got American innovation front and center. And so we're using our public funds not only through procurement, but really using the investments we're making with public tax dollars to make sure that we're actually advancing towards some of these goals, that we're affecting the kind of change that we want towards these shared values. And so much of what we're doing is also, we require these community benefits plans, which to me is just like innovation in government, where as part of the IRA and bill funding announcements and all of the loan applications, community benefits plans are actually required by the awardees. And so they have to show how are they investing in America's workforce, how are they engaging communities and labor, in what ways are they advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and then how are they implementing projects that produce benefits for underserved communities through our Justice 40 program. And that program basically was one of the first executive orders that the president announced when he took office that mandates that 40% of all of our overall climate investments flow down to underserved communities. And so we require these benefits plans at the beginning. It's, I think, 20% of the merit review for these projects, and that has to be implemented and monitored throughout the project life cycle. Just a great example to kind of close this out, to put a little bit of kind of flavor to how these programs work. We have an Appalachian Hydrogen Hub project. I'm sure everybody remembers the hydrogen hubs. People have been asking about them for the last year. And so the hub is advancing the production of low-cost hydrogen, and we're looking at investing in hydrogen pipelines and fueling stations, permanent CO2 storage. And what the program is doing is bringing quality jobs specifically to coal communities in Appalachia. It's going to create 21,000 direct jobs, and it'll create new partnerships with colleges, with workforce organizations, as a way to make sure that there's equitable development that is happening in these communities, and they're really brought into these hub projects. So again, I just love this program because it's a way of reminding us all that the reason we're doing this, the reason we're making these investments, is for our communities and for our people. I think just like a final thought is, I know that like procurement is not sexy, right? You're not standing there cutting a ribbon. People, like, nobody's ever asking us about our procurement, but they want to know about all the hydrogen hubs and all the money. But like at the end of the day, procurement programs are a way for us to leverage billions of dollars that we're investing. We singly control how we're going to do that, and it's just such an effective way of us together actually moving toward shared goals, moving the market in the direction that we want to, and again, not just for climate reasons, but really thinking about how we can use this to actually benefit our communities. So I'm just so glad that we're actually having a panel that is focused on how we leverage a very unsexy tool that is actually very effective. So just thank you to our partners who are on stage that are doing this through the private sector. And I would just like encourage the rest of us as governments to continue to really dig in and see how we can leverage one of the best tools we have available in the toolbox. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear a little bit about how our Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy, is really thinking differently about driving the change and actually getting the full benefit of the opportunity to make this shift. You know, we only make these shifts once every, 100 years? And so actually, as we think about the fundamental energy infrastructure, to think about not just where we get our electrons, but the rest of the package of how to make the rest of the conversation happen. So with that, I'd love to introduce our panelists. So for openers, my name is Kevin Hagan. I'm the CEO of the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance. And we are a consortium of some 400 corporate entities and business partners and NGOs today who are thinking about how to use energy procurement, that perhaps not so sexy, I'll give you that, everyday decision of where we buy our electricity for better cost, for better output. You know, we spend millions, billions, in fact, on every month electricity bills. Let's use that to really make a difference. Think about how to do new levels of innovative contracting and drive differences in the way we procure electricity to create some amazing benefits. Many of the folks here on the stage have actually that experience and are really showing that it works and where we're going next. So let me do this first. Let me ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and then I'll ask each of them as a separate run to make a few comments about where we start, and then ask a few questions, and then we'll maybe get some audience questions as well. So starting here.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Kristen Seaman. I'm Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at GM. Thanks for having us here this morning.
Hi, I'm Jake Goster. I am the Director for Energy and Environment and Sustainability Public Policy for Amazon Web Services, the cloud computing business of Amazon, and I cover the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region.
Yeah, thanks for having me. John Powers with Schneider Electric. So I'm our Global Vice President of Renewable Energy and Carbon. Schneider's got some pretty strong goals ourselves, but I'm here representing our advisory business, where we advise some 150 to 200 large energy buyers on how to achieve renewable energy targets.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Noor Yafai. I work for the Nature Conservancy. I lead our teams in Europe that engage with governments on policy and partnerships. I'm here actually in place of a dear colleague of mine, Bruce, who is actually much more involved in the US and CEBA work. So imagine me as a tall, silver-haired dude called Bruce. I'm helping him out today.
I'm having a hard time with that. Well, thank you. And one of the things that that Clean Energy Buyers Alliance has done recently, associated with both our trade association side and our nonprofit C3 Clean Energy Buyers Institute, has been to think a little bit about what it would take to really drive bigger change across the supply chain conversation and how to empower our energy buyers to do more. Recently, we released something called the If I had trouble with Julie's title, watch this. We released the Principles of Purpose-Driven Power Procurement. And this package is really designed to create some principles so that our energy buyers can all ask the same question. And by asking the same question, a consistent set of questions across the supply chain, our supply chain developers and service providers can start thinking about innovative ways to actually change the way things have been done in the past and to differentiate their products and solutions on ways in which it is more environmentally and more socially responsible, which has been a really neat innovation in the process. Recently, we released a toolkit. In fact, recently means Monday. We released a toolkit for helping our partners actually implement those changes in their procurement strategies. I want to start at this end, and maybe ask each of you to take a minute to just kind of give us a little sense of how you see this change happening, where you guys fit in the picture, and how your organizations are being part of this.
Sure, so I'll start. So from General Motors' standpoint, we've made some pretty bold commitments around renewable energy. We had made a plan back in 2016 to be 100% renewable across the globe by 2050. We actually significantly overachieved in the US and have everything procured to meet that by 2025. So 25 years, thank you, ahead of schedule. We're well on our way to our global target for 2035. You know, and CEBA, in working together and collaborating on standards and initiatives and policies, has really helped us, enable us to do that. There's lots more that we still need to do in order to meet our goal of carbon neutral by 2040. We need to charge all of those EVs that we're putting out on the road with green energy. So the decarbonization of the grid, the additionality that's needed to meet the demand, the standards that are needed to be put in place in order to enable things like vehicle to grid and really take advantage of the vehicles on the road and as an additional energy source. Those are things that we really need to work together across companies to find solutions and put initiatives in place, which is why things like Beyond the Megawatt and the work that CEBA is doing are extremely helpful and important for us to be part of.
Yeah, happy to go next. So for Amazon, we've been obviously working very hard on procuring renewable energy. We are the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy. Our global portfolio is now 479 projects around the world in 26 different countries, and we have a total capacity of a little more than 23 gigawatts of renewable energy around the world. To put that into context, like Bruce, I live in Brussels, and one of the things I like is that 23 gigawatts is really close to Belgium's overall generation capacity, which is about 24 gigawatts. So Amazon's global procurement is now just about the amount as would power the country that I live in, which gives you a sense of scale. Like GM, we have a global renewable energy target as well. We're working to power our business with 100% renewable energy. We originally set that target for 2030. We didn't quite get there 25 years ahead of time, but yeah, but recently we did realize that we wanted to go faster. Like there's a reason for us to go fast. The reason that we're all here is because obviously we're at this point in time where we need to find ways to accelerate. So this is one of those things where we felt like we can go faster. The technology exists and the tools exist, and so we pull that goal ahead to 2025, and we're now on a path to get there by 2025. And as of last count, we're at 90% renewable around the globe with that 23 gigawatts. So we're pretty excited about that. And I think similarly, we have found that working in coalitions of buyers to send demand signals and be able to work collectively has been really valuable for us. We've been a part of CEBA for many, many years and really value our relationship with CEBA, the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance. We work in Europe with Resource, which is the platform for corporate renewable energy buyers in Europe. We also just helped stand up the Asia Clean Energy Coalition that's helping us open markets in Asia, which is a really challenging region for us to be able to access renewables. Really important for our own footprint as well as our suppliers and trying to reduce supply chain emissions. And so we've found collective action really works, and that's just the renewables examples. We've also we helped found ZEMBA, the Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance, COSEV, the corporate zero emission vehicles. I'll stop there, but you get the idea. Acronym after acronym of demand groups, but we found that demand signals work, and while Amazon can use its scale to really drive change, we do much better when we partner up with Siemens and with GM and with NGOs like TNC to say the demand signals can send a message around procurement. And I think we believe that same model works in principles for, I can't remember what the PPP.
The principles for purpose-driven power procurement.
Very good. That's two. I bet Kevin before the panel that I could get him to do it 5 times. As we approach the 9th day of COP, you just start getting a little spicy, and so.
You're the one who has a flight that you need to make.
Exactly. That's two. Yeah. But yeah, that working collectively, we could help to send those signals, and we were an early, if not, I think, opening investor in Beyond the Megawatt to say we really see value in CEBA taking this up, in working collectively with the community of buyers to try to send that, just to figure out what those principles should be, and then to be able to publish those principles and say, here's the right way to do this, here's how we think that buyers can work with this. And so we're really excited about the work that CEBA's been doing, and of course the recent publication that I won't ask you to name again.
Okay, yeah, happy to go next. So at Schneider, as I mentioned, we've got our own RE100 target, EV100 target, net zero target by 2030, looking to reduce our supply chain emissions, et cetera, but really as is relevant for this conversation, we're the largest advisor to corporate procurement of renewable energy in the world. So we actually worked with Amazon, AWS I'll call it, to keep with the acronyms on some of your first PPAs. Now you're at 478 or something like that, so kudos. We've, I think, advised 18 to 19 gigawatts of PPAs, so once we get to Belgium, I'll have that in the back of my head to to call out, which is an exciting stat. And so right now, currently, we're representing globally maybe 150 to 200 large multinational corporate buyers of renewable energy, totaling 50 to 60 terawatt hours of annual electricity load. And they're all trying to get to 100% renewable, just like Schneider ourselves. It's an interesting position because it's primarily not the big tech companies anymore. You guys can kind of do it on your own. You don't need somebody like Schneider, which is fantastic, force multiplier. So it's much more manufacturing, commercial, industrial, a variety of different perspectives. And so when it comes to Beyond the Megawatt, you know, all of our clients have come with a slightly different perspective of what that means. So I think it's important too, there's, you know, a lot of times in the press it gets conflated. What is an energy attribute certificate? What is a REC? What is a guarantee of origin? What is the purpose of it? And we believe pretty strongly the purpose of that is for tracking the usage of renewable energy, and that's really important. Who's using the renewable energy? Only one person can claim it. There's no double counting, and you can retire that. It's not necessarily for impact or for reduction, right? It's tracking usage. Now, all of our clients want more impact and more reduction beyond just the usage metric, which is really important. And so when we think of Beyond the Megawatt, it's what are additional ways to add impact to your renewable energy purchase and your carbon reduction usage claim. And so for some of our clients, that's additionality. That's the marketing claim, but for me, this project doesn't get built. So maybe they're going to sign a long-term PPA. Maybe they're going to do a direct investment in a project, a tax equity investment. Without any of these contributions, a project doesn't go forward, right? Maybe it's supporting a just transition. Maybe it's matching their load on a local grid with 24/7 carbon-free energy. Maybe it's supporting renewable energy in the dirtiest grid region around the world, regardless of if they have load there or not. So all of these we think are really important and valuable ways to go beyond the megawatt and to add impact to the purchase, impact to what you're doing. Our position representing so many of these clients is there's no one right solution, right? And no one project is going to check every box. I mean, the 24/7 and the emissionality one, the one where you're going to the dirtiest grid, those are absolutely don't work together unless you happen to have your load in the dirtiest grid, right? So there's going to be trade-offs and choices. So we just think it's really important to understand what the whole gamut of Beyond the Megawatt solutions are, understand what that particular buyer, that particular client's goals are, and then try to solve the equation that way.
Thank you. So at TNC, our scientists pioneered the Site Renewables Right methodology, and it's been great to see how that's really taken off, first of all in North America, but also now in India, in Europe, parts of the Western Balkans, and in other parts of the world. And we've really seen a strong and positive reaction, both from the industry and also from government. So in Europe, the Repower EU package, for example, now actually contains, in the Renewable Energy Directive, this concept of renewable acceleration areas. And EU member states will now have around 25 months to designate areas where you can have faster permitting on areas where there's lower conflict with biodiversity, using science and credible methodologies upfront to help speed up permitting and reduce risk, both to biodiversity, but also to investments. And I suppose our work in the voluntary market space in procurement also was born out of a question that I think our friends at Salesforce posed to TNC back in 2018, which was, what does a good renewables project look like? And I think there's been many folks, including all of you, working on that ever since. But we do see very strong demand coming from the private sector. Some of you will be familiar with a Bain study that TNC helped to sponsor, which has found that over 60% of US-based corporate energy customers do believe that a purpose-driven approach to clean energy will be the new standard in the next 5 years. So what at TNC do we see as a vision? Well, it's about absolutely making sure that renewable projects do avoid negative impacts to wildlife, to biodiversity, and all of the ecosystem benefits, if you like, that are associated with them. It's also about harnessing this new wave of investments to try to drive investments in degraded lands and areas that could actually see a lot of associated benefits. For example, repurposing former coal mines, revitalizing areas of former brownfield sites. We believe that there's a great opportunity to really drive some win-win-wins, both for climate, for biodiversity, and for people. And that makes good business sense. So all of this really requires a much more coherent approach. And what we're seeing is some great best practice coming from the US, now also from Europe, elsewhere in the world. I'm very encouraged by what we're seeing in India, for example. What I think we need to ultimately move towards is an internationally recognized set of principles for best practice, for siting, that are going to give clear investment signals to the industry, that are going to build confidence among civil society and communities, and that are also going to help us accelerate what we need to do, which is triple renewable energies, but in a way that is nature positive and works in harmony with people and communities. That's what I think we need to try to take away from this COP28 and work to between now and the next.
Those are great comments. There are thousands of companies today with net zero claims, or at least net zero ambitions. We've got ambition. Ambition is no longer the question in the corporate community, in my opinion. It's action. And in fact, many of these organizations, many of the leaders in this space already are taking bold action that's making a difference. I think the key now is, how do we learn from what we've done so far? It all wasn't perfect. We didn't get it all right. Well, let's just own that. We're going to learn from some of that, because the point of innovation is to iterate, learn, and do it better. So with the leadership of this community in places where they've already made incredible investments, already buying a tremendous amount of clean energy solutions, we started to realize, hey, we can do even more with the way we think about things. So let me kind of pose this question a little bit for the group. What are some ways in which you guys have seen your actions actually have some of those impacts? Some of those stories of success that can help all of our constituents and all of other companies recognize that, in fact, being thoughtful about the way we buy electricity actually opens the door to more reliable, more resilient, environmentally and socially responsible, cost-effective, clean energy for everybody. So maybe I don't need to go in any specific order. I know that all of you have these. Don't look puzzled. I know you have these answers. In fact, you guys have more answers of these than most. So maybe an example of programs that had that little extra something that showed us the way forward.
I'll try and give two examples, or maybe generalities. The first is around how PPAs, how you fit them into a business, budget or decision, right? I mean, part of my role as the CSO at GM is to make sure that our sustainability strategies are aligned and integrated with our business strategies. And so when we first set out on our renewable energy journey, it was looked at in a longer term than what we typically do, and looked at as, some are going to be financially positive and some aren't. And as the market changes, that's going to go up and down. But to try and look at it over the longer term to be able to drive some financial decisions and frankly put some stability into what our financial outlook looked like. And it's been very positive to look at it through that longer term lens than we typically would on a project. So I would encourage companies that are looking now to think about it in a bigger sense. Maybe a completely different view is as we look, and I think we can all probably give examples here of projects that are out there, right? That's part of the challenge right now, is where do we find the projects, and additionality is still a big piece of it. So we're looking at it from all aspects of our business: what's available today, what's going to be available, what can we create, and maybe what can we innovate. And when we talk about innovation, we've done a partnership with a company called Wind Catching Systems, where they're developing offshore wind technology that instead of a giant single turbine that we're all used to, it's an array of smaller turbines that can produce about 15 times more energy in the same ocean footprint. It can be farther offshore, and so it gets rid of some of the challenges that offshore wind has today. And so I think we've got to keep looking for what are those new technologies that are going to enable us to do more in the future.
Yeah, I'll follow that with two examples around impact and thinking about impact. So first, I mentioned that we have renewable energy projects in 26 countries, and I think a lot of those, obviously Europe and the US, but some of those markets have been really challenging, and some of those markets offer us a lot of opportunity to make impact. And of course, I mentioned that I cover Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and so some of those projects in my particular part of the world are I think, quite interesting. And one of the ones that we announced 2 years ago was our first renewable energy project in South Africa. And it's a 10 megawatt project, and it is valuable for a number of different reasons. First of all, from an emissionality perspective or a carbon matching perspective, which is something we think is a really good approach for carbon accounting, that project avoids a significant amount of emissions. It's a very coal-intensive grid. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but obviously it avoids a lot more emissions than if it were in California. And so that's a really great place to have a project. Similarly, we have 1.1 gigawatts in India, lots and lots of avoided emissions. So that project in South Africa is a good example of that. Second of all, if you're following South Africa energy issues, you're very aware that South Africa has a reliability challenge, and they have a shortfall of generation that is driving that reliability challenge. So if we can add a new project to that grid, we are also adding new capacity to that grid, and that's an incredibly valuable thing in a country that is facing generation shortfalls that are driving reliability challenges. Third is we partnered with a local firm to do that project. And so we were really happy to do that, really proud to do that. And I think that was a really good opportunity for us to build a relationship with a local company to be able to do that project. And so, that's one example. I'll go quick because I think we're almost out of time. The other one is, at least, and for my benefit, because I have to catch a flight, we've done a number of offshore wind projects in Europe. One of which is a partnership with a project off the coast of the Netherlands called the HKN Shell project. And that project has a lot of innovative technologies attached to it that are being pilot tested. It has floating solar panels, it has smart wind turbines, it has battery storage. And so it's a project that is actually designed to be a test bed for new pilot technologies alongside also being a large-scale offshore wind project. And so I think those are two really examples where we look at impact and we see a broad array of benefits beyond just the megawatt.
Yeah, way to tie it in. You need that one with all the P's in it next. So I'll give two quick examples from international markets and then one broader example in the US. So a great example is Velux, client of ours in Europe, and when they did their renewable energy project, the biodiversity angle was one of the critical factors. That was absolutely part of what they wanted to do in they do skylights, windows, et cetera, and it's just a big part of what they wanted to be a part of. And so their project is promoting pollinators, promoting biodiversity. There's a great case study on it we can share. A second one quickly is a tech company that I'm 99% sure is public. We work with is Salesforce, where they... It is now. Where they, don't get mad at me, Max, where they were really looking on the emissionality side to say, like, where in the world can we offset the most emissions? And so we're looking at, it didn't really have to do with where they have their data centers or a bunch of load. It was, let's look at Poland, let's look at Queensland. We ended up with a project in Queensland, Australia, which is a very coal-heavy grid. That they were able to displace a lot of additional emissions, which is an interesting, because I don't know exactly how much load they have in Queensland, but it's not nearly the size of the project that they supported. And then an interesting example that's very topical right now in the US is actually opened up with the Inflation Reduction Act, is for decades we've had tax credit investment in renewable energy in the US. But these projects don't pay enough taxes to take advantage of those tax credits, so they have to bring in a third-party investor. And so that tax investor has generally been the big banks. They had to be an equity owner of the project. It was quite a complicated structure. You had to be 99% owner for X number of years. Not many companies could get their head around, and the tax incentives kept coming and going every 2 years. So not many companies could get their head around this tax equity investment. JP Morgan and Bank of America have traditionally had 50% of the $20 billion tax equity market in the US year over year. So with the Inflation Reduction Act, one of the critical things, in addition to extending those tax credits, they said we can actually have tax credit transfer. And what that means is you don't have to be an equity investor in the project. So one of the big bottlenecks in US renewable energy development is not enough tax equity investment, right? Nowadays we've kind of, through the work of CEBA and a lot of us there's a lot of demand for renewable energy in the US right now. There's not enough investors, there's not enough tax investors. So what we've actually seen is a way to drive that additionality beyond the megawatt, and pulling it back around to that, is this tax equity investment could actually be a bigger impact on some of these projects than the power offtake, right? Where there's a real constraint in the amount of tax investment. So now that you can transfer tax credits, you can just write a check for $93 million to a wind farm and get $100 million in tax credits back. You don't have to be an equity owner. So that's really unlocked the ability for many companies that are paying taxes in the US to participate. So this has been really exciting for us. In the 6 months since the guidance was finalized by the IRS, we've had clients commit over $8 billion in tax liability to invest in new renewable energy projects against the $20 billion industry. So that's it's roughly a 40% increase in that market. So it's really a way that companies are thinking creatively beyond just power offtake or PPA of how can my support of renewables be additional, get new projects built, and help drive this industry forward.
Thanks. So obviously we're not a company, but from a civil society perspective, we do selectively partner with companies and industry. And so if I put my Bruce hat back on for a second and pretend I'm Bruce, he will probably want me to mention the example of TNC's collaboration with Rivian electric vehicles in the US, which is really inspiring. So road testing in real time, those purpose-driven principles in implementing them in the collaboration in partnership with Level 10, Audubon Society. So that one's really cool. I think that's a really great example. Let me put my hat back on as me sitting in Brussels in Europe and say, I was personally really inspired at the multi-stakeholder collaboration that you all have been in CEBA. And when I started at TNC in Brussels 2 years ago, one of the first things I did was I wanted to set up a partnership with the European power sector, which we did. And TNC launched that partnership actually at COP27 in Egypt last year. And part of our collaboration has been initially on a project called Power Plant. And if you've never seen that, I really encourage you to read that, because it's a great summary of the European industry's commitment to putting biodiversity at the very heart of planning for renewable energy projects. And I'm really pleased to say that just earlier this week, together we launched the second project along those lines, Power Plant 2, which will be a joint civil society industry guidebook on how to site responsibly, what those best practices look like, and what that means in terms of where we take that next in policy terms. So we've been inspired by your example, your collaboration. We're accelerating that kind of collaboration now in Europe. And we also, as TNC, jointly declared with the Global Renewables Alliance earlier this week a 5-point action plan for how we can triple renewable energies in a nature positive, just and equitable way. And that's something I'd love to see you all get behind and move with us on, because all of the inspiring stories I'm hearing today have a place in that overall, I think, global effort to get to triple energy, renewable energy in the best way possible.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for all of that. You know, the power of collaboration across our businesses and through the NGO community is incredibly useful. Let's not kid ourselves. Not every project we've ever tried worked. We're gonna be honest. And in fact, what's wonderful is that not every other company has to make the same mistakes twice. Right? We are collaborating through this kind of consortium to share stories, to be peer-to-peer advocates, to be able to understand a little bit behind the curtain of how deals got put together. You know, we've all thought a lot about the innovation happening in the technology side of the renewable and clean energy space. But I hope you got a little sense here of the creativity and the innovation that's happening in the deal-making side of what's happening, the business case and the business conversation, literally the contractual arrangements are some of the most innovative places where this is accelerating the process for actually driving this forward. And we've made a big difference so far, but we have just really begun. By gathering more business and more collaboration to this initiative, to the way of thinking about collectively driving our business decision-making for more equitable, more environmentally responsible, more reliable, more cost-effective grid for everyone. We're really starting to show through your stories and through the DOE and through the ways that we're really putting this together that business actually can be part of the solution when we think a little bit more about using our power for good. Thank you so much for being here today and for joining us in this process.